On this week's episode of I Think I've Been Doing My Intro Wrong This Whole Time, we are going to be discussing the worst books that I've read thus far. Is it on this week's episode or on today's episode? I have talked about some of these books in my very first video talking about what I read in 2019. It wasn't a lot of books, but a lot of the books that I did read in 2019 weren't very good. Actually, all of the ones on this list have 2 stars. I'm going to explain my rating system just a little bit, so it's here in the beginning, and for any other videos, it's kind of how my mind works. So if a book is well written, but maybe the plot isn't there, or maybe the character development isn't there, I might give it a 3. If a book is not well written, it's kind of like something you would read in middle/high school, like Vampire Diaries or Twilight, something very easy, but the plot is exciting and you love the characters, I might give that a 3. So there's like the plot to look for, the characters, and the way it's written. If one is really high and the others are low, it might rate the same as if it was the opposite way. It's not all going to be on like the same sort of level, like, oh, she rated this one a 3, so I'm not going to enjoy it because I didn't enjoy the other one she rated a 3. It's not going to be like that. I am very open and general about the things that I like. Like right now I'm reading basically just a very cliche bad boy and good girl romance type series, and I'm loving it. Like, it's so cheesy and cliche, but the first book I gave a 3. Like, it's just so so it's not really anything against the book as a whole, just these different aspects that I look at when I'm rating. So that's why these are a 2. So it's going to be a mixture of just things that really didn't hit the mark, like the writing, the plot, and the characters for me. So just keep that in mind. So the first one is actually the first DNF. I have 2 on this list. The first DNF of last year, and it's The Boy Who Couldn't Die by William Sleater. I kind of got a little bit heated in my first video talking about this just because it was so like to me stupid. Granted, every book I feel like should be read. You should give everybody a chance if it's something that you're interested in. But this one was just... So the premise was that this boy's best friend, a 16-year-old boy's best friend, died in a plane crash. And after that happened, he didn't want to face death. He didn't want to face death, and he didn't want to think about ever dying. So he goes and finds psychic or someone who works with magic, something along those lines, to get him to be invincible. So within the first chapter, that all happens, which I like a book that moves fast. It keeps you interested. So that all happens. He meets the psychic. He becomes invincible. Then he goes home. And this is where I was like, okay. Because at this point, the writing was very easy and very simple, which with my rating system is not a bad thing. But then paired with the characters and the plot and... okay, so he goes home. And I remember that his mom is like pulling a very hot casserole dish like directly from the oven, like she just pulled it out, and this kid reaches over and grabs the hot casserole dish, which, like, first of all, in general, you would never do. Like, you would never, like, a child maybe, like a little baby, but not a 16-year-old teenager would just go and grab a very hot pan, right? So he grabs it, and then his mother is like, stop, what are you doing? That just came out of a 450-degree oven. Like, like, she said the degree as if we, the reader, were not already like, wow, that's a hot pan, because it was just pulled out of the oven. Like, it was very on the nose, you know what I mean? And I don't like when an author or a narrator or whatever force feeds you the information. Like, we are smart, right? We know how to read because we're reading a book. And for it to be like, this is what's happening, like, this is the pivotal moment. You know he's invincible because it's a 450-degree oven that this was just pulled out of. It's just, are we stupid? So I don't know if this book was like middle grade or anything. I didn't look that much into it. But I do know that the reviews weren't that bad. Like, the rating was not like a 2. It might have been a middle 3 or a high 3 or something like that, but I stopped after reading that. I think I read one more chapter where the boy was he liked a girl at school or thought she was pretty or something, but she had a boyfriend who was like this big bully slash jock. I don't really know what his deal was. And the kid was like, yeah, I'm gonna take you on the date. I don't care about your boyfriend, blah, blah, blah. And like didn't care about getting beat up because he was invincible. And it was like, yeah, that's great. Like, you don't have to worry about being hurt. But like me personally, if I had like the fattest crush on someone and I knew they were in a relationship, even if I was invincible, I could never be like, we're going on a date. Like, you're doing it. Because first of all, what if they don't want to? What if they say no? Then what? And the second thing is like, that's so embarrassing. Even if the guy or person that they're dating or whatever is a mean, bully, jerk, whatever, it's still like weird. It's so strange. So I stopped reading that book. I hope to never remember that because it makes me laugh. Oh, it makes me laugh. Hope to erase it from my memory completely. The second book is Not If I Save You First by Allie Carter. This one, the plot, just reading the summary on the back, was so interesting. I was like, okay, just from this alone, like this book is going to be a 3 for sure, at least. The plot is the president's son and the Secret Service's, one of the Secret Service members, his daughter, they become best friends at like a really young age. There is a traumatic accident that happens involving both of them. And after the accident, the Secret Service agent leaves the White House and goes and lives a life of like secrecy with his daughter. So these two best friends get pulled apart. And in the beginning, the daughter, writes all of these letters to her former best friend. And it's like 2 years that she writes letters. And she's like, I miss you, like blah, 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 just, fun stuff. And so the president's son never writes her back, and you read in the book that just how angry and hurt she is, and like she says that it felt like her best friend died because he just like would not reply to her, right? So the premise of the book is that they eventually reconnect, and then the president's son gets kidnapped after they reconnect. So they're together, and then he gets kidnapped by somebody in the Russian mob in some sort of deal with Russian agents or I don't know what it is. I don't know who they were. So he gets kidnapped, and so the girl is on a mission to go and get him. So in the video that I posted about what I read in 2019, I said that it was really cool because it's like the dynamic that he's the son of a president and he's just been kidnapped, and she's the daughter of a Secret Service agent and she has to go find him. So like that's what intrigued me. So back to the letters now, when she was saying how hurt and whatever she was, after they reconnect, she somehow just completely forgets that and goes back and forth between being so hurt by it and then like not forgiving him but being like okay with him, which yeah, they were best friends, so like of course you want to be reunited with your best friend, but it was not organic in the way that it was done. It was just so like fast. It was just one single book. I think it was like 300 something pages. And we had this development of the tragic accident that happened in the beginning, then her writing these letters and him never replying, her hating him and being just so hurt and not really wanting to see him after they reunite, which I get, I understand. And then her then being like, this is fine. I am trying my best not to laugh at his jokes because I'm mad at him. And like, that's not how a real person would act. I would be very mad. And then, so where it really went downhill, despite these back and forth, like no development feelings, was just how fast it moved. Like, I love fast moving, action-packed things, but this was a lot. From the time that they reconnected and like he got kidnapped, it was 2 days before the book was ending. So in those 2 days, oh, sisters, it was too much, and it was just very cheesy. And I remember anytime that the Russian that kidnapped him would see the girl, I don't remember any of their names, can you tell? Would see the girl, like this was her plan to get him back. She made herself known. And so after the Russian would yell at her or try to be intimidating, the president's son would be like, don't talk to her, get away, blah, blah, blah. Literally, like, every 2 pages. It was too much. It was every other page. And I said, this boy has 2 lines of dialogue and he is using them. He knows his lines and he's delivering. It was an easy read. There was no real development for the character, so that's why it was 2 stars. I got through it maybe in like a day and a half just because it was so easy and I was like interested because it was fast moving, but too much happened. There wasn't enough time to really like the characters. Maybe if the author split it into 2 books or made a series out of it, it could have been much better, honestly, but just for the standalone book, not great. The second book that I DNF'd, actually, I just DNF'd it like 2 days ago. It's Before We Met by Lucy Whitehouse. I picked this book up because Kayla from Books and Lala gave it 4 stars, I think. I think I remember that correctly. And she said that she liked it, so I added it to my TBR and I got it. And so I looked at reviews just because I know that the rating on Goodreads was like a 3 something. And I trusted Kayla's judgment completely. So I just wanted to see the reasons why they didn't like it. And they were saying like the writing was boring and like blah, blah, blah. And it was just too in depth, which it was, which I'll get to in a second. But that doesn't really deter me from a book. I like books, yeah, that are fast action. But I also like books that are descriptive and flowery and can build up to something. So I didn't mind it that much. And the premise of the book itself was interesting. It was published in 2014, so at that time I had just graduated high school and I knew that there was a lot of cliche or books that were very cookie cutter in a specific genre that was happening while I was in high school. And so reading it now, I knew what I was kind of getting myself into for a book from that time. This woman married this man and he goes away on business trips all the time. And he always tells her when his flight's getting back so she can pick him up at the airport. So one day he had told her when he was getting back and she went there to the airport and he never came out. So I thought the book was her not speaking to him until like the climax and like not knowing what was happening. He like called her multiple times after the fact that he didn't show up at the airport. And was just like, hey, like business got extended and my phone died. I'm so sorry, blah, 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 which, you know, is normal. So he kept in contact with her throughout whenever he said he was coming back, the couple days till then. So it wasn't as exciting of her trying to be like, well, I haven't heard from my husband in like a week and like, where is he? In the first 2 days that he didn't reply to her. And then even after he had called her and was like talking about business, she kept finding more and more things out that didn't make sense. Like his assistant or receptionist or whatever she was and his other partner thought that he was in Rome on a secret like vacation with her, his wife, but he wasn't. He said that he was in New York. So just like small things like that. I stopped reading, I think a little bit before halfway. And it wasn't because of anything with the writing or the characters, because I really liked the descriptions that the author was giving, even if it was very flowery and very detailed, like the most random things. Like the author would just go on a tangent describing like one object. I liked it. But what I didn't like is that there was a slur, the R slur, used to describe people with mental disabilities or handicaps, which, here's the thing, stories that are about like racism or homophobia or ableism or anything like that, or a narrative written by someone who has experienced those things, slurs and things have their own right and their own place in those stories. Slurs themselves are not going to deter me from a story as long as they fit, or as long as the character saying them, it makes sense for them to do so, whether it's their own right to do so or they are just a horrible person and that's who they are and it's supposed to, you know, show you how bad of a person they are. The way in which this slur was given was from a mid-30-year-old woman, the wife, to her brother because I think it was when he was mad that he didn't meet her fiance before they got engaged. This was before they were married. He was mad that he hadn't met the guy because they lived in two separate places. And so she said something like, "Do you think I'm an emotional," and said the word. And yes, this was written in 2014, so it wasn't recent, and a lot of people are like, "Oh, PC culture, blah, blah, blah." But, like, be respectful. So this was written in 2014 by an adult woman. The author is an adult woman. The narrative of an adult woman. And there was no characters that were mentally disabled or handicapped. There was no talk of that sort of situation. Nothing built up to that. It was literally thrown in there. I don't know if the author was like, yeah, this is how people talk, right? This is how people talk. There was just no need for it. And, like, I remember, this was 2 days ago, so I remember as soon as I read it, I literally, like, scoffed, and I closed the book, and I immediately posted on my Instagram asking if slurs deter readers if they aren't pertinent to the plot or to the character development, and, like, 90% of people were like, yeah, I stopped reading the book. So that made me feel better, because I didn't want to be the sole person, like, y'all still reading books like these? But everyone that I follow or that follows me is really good about that. So after I read that, I think I just finished the chapter, and then I looked at the rest of the reviews on Goodreads and how they were saying it was boring and the plot led nowhere, like everyone expected what was going to happen. So at that point, I called it quits. I will not be finishing that book. I'm going to give it away to my local thrift store, and I don't know. I don't want to say that I hope someone else enjoys it, because I also don't want to give my time and energy to an author that thinks it's okay to do that. Granted, the author may now know that it was the wrong choice. I'm not vilifying them in any way. I'm not throwing hate to them. But it is just something I'm not okay with, you know? So that's where I stand on that. That's why I did not finish the book, and that's why I do not recommend that book. Okay, the next book, I'm gonna sit back for this one. This one's gonna be a little dicey because so many people love this book. People that I watch on YouTube, the people that I follow on social media, gave this book 4 or 5 stars. I gave it 2. It is Dig by A.S. King. Listen, okay. I was very excited about this book. I did not exactly know what the, like, plot was, because it was kind of vague, and the writing in which for every character, the writing that it has is also kind of confusing and a little bit vague. So even then, I still didn't know exactly what it was about. But from my perspective now, I hope that I can give you a more clarifying synopsis. There's this family who descended from potato farmers, and this whole book is basically them somehow re-intertwining because they're not in each other's lives anymore, and them coming together for Easter dinner, I think. And there's topics of racism, there's topics of white privilege, of slavery, of assault. I'm not sure if it was sexual assault, so a very tentative trigger warning. There was no explicitness to it, but there was definitely assault. Just a lot of heavy subjects, but not done so in a way that is gonna, like, make you cry or anything like that. I gave this book 2 stars because I thought it was gonna be a hard-hitting book. I thought that it was gonna get me. It was gonna talk about very serious subjects. And I feel like it didn't go deep enough. It was very, very surface level. So the book itself has different points of view, from the different grandchildren to the grandparents that are basically the last people to have run, like, the potato farm or to be a farmer. So it's the points of view of all of these grandchildren, and they don't know each other because their family has kind of been separated. So every point of view is very distinct, and it's written in a way that you know which character is talking, and I really liked that. I especially liked, what was it? I keep thinking of Fleabag, the show, because This girl in Dig, one of the girls in Dig, she had like this flea circus, and I can't remember what her name was, but I keep thinking Fleabag. Is that right? Probably not. But I really liked the way that her narrative was written. It was like everything that she was doing just in everyday life, it was given to you in a sense that she was performing for an audience. And anything, like, for example, if her dad would speak or her dad would do an action, she would talk about how it was unplanned or it was really well rehearsed, and he's getting really good at that. So I really liked the way that her narrative was written. But the writing itself just did not propel it up enough to give it a 3 or above. And I think that though it touched on very important subjects, it didn't go deep enough. It was very just right here. It was things that you probably already know. I was not excited by it. I didn't really understand the plot. There was no, I thought maybe when they got together, like, very deep secrets would come out. And I know in the synopsis it said something about, like, finding out what it meant to keep the family name or something like that. And it was just not, very lackluster, very not gripping. I had bought this book used because I like used books, and because I was like, oh, I'm gonna love it. I am gonna love it. I just know it. And I didn't. I'm gonna be donating this book and any of the books that I have physical copies left of, because I did donate some of these already. But I don't know. If you like books about those subjects, like racism or slavery or white privilege, because that was pretty the majority of the book, but you don't want to be upset over it and you kind of just want to see it in everyday life, how people, you know, talk about it and stuff, this is a fine book for that. This is a good book for that. It wasn't out of pocket. The author didn't do anything wrong in writing this. I just felt like maybe it was tainted from how excited or how much people loved it. And it was just every character, there was like 4 or 5 of the grandchildren's point of views. They all were talking about like the same concept, which I saw a lot of 1 to 2 star reviews talking about how they didn't like the author's stance or like political stance or anything like that. And I'm like, I liked it. Granted, I do agree with those things about what they were talking about, racism and white privilege and stuff. And they also showed the opposition, especially from the grandchildren's parents, because the parents and the grandparents were very Republican and very conservative, and all the children weren't. And so obviously, if you're a Democrat or not Republican or conservative and you agree with these stances on white privilege and slavery and stuff, you're going to enjoy that. You're going to like it. So I didn't really have a problem with the author's point of view or whatever they were trying to sell to the audience as what people said. I didn't find it pushy. I found it very real, because racism is bad, slavery is bad, white privilege is real, and there's nothing wrong with writing about that. I just thought it was done in a way that was kind of a little bit boring. It didn't really hold my attention, and I don't know. That's just my onion, and I think other people are going to really like it if they ever get a chance to read it. I just maybe think I hyped it up too much, and that's why. Okay. This book is driving me a little crazy, because I was dead set. I have not changed my review. I have not changed how I felt about it, but I was dead set on what I thought, and I was like, people are going to agree with me. No. A lot of reviews on this book. Okay. So it's The Dumb House by John Burnside. I didn't like it. I like edgy books. I like books that push what makes you comfortable with reading. I don't shy away from certain topics, and I don't shy away from problematic characters, even if they're not redeemable. You know, a bad character does not equal a bad book. But okay, I'm going to talk about something. It might be a spoiler if you haven't read this. It's not going to spoil the whole book or where the plot goes or anything. It's kind of in the beginning. So the plot of this book is that this man, well, I guess he was a boy when he heard the story. This boy heard a story about the dumb house. And the dumb house was an experiment done by this man to see if language was innate in babies. So like when babies grew up, do they already know the language or did they learn it from people around them? And so he conducted this experiment in this house with deaf maids and nannies and stuff, so the children would have to create their own language. So the boy in the book heard this story and became obsessed with it, became obsessed with language and how children learn it and is it inside of them. So the plot of the book is him trying to figure that out, becoming more and more obsessed with this idea, and at the end he conducts his own experiments on his own children. And that's all part of the summary. I'm not spoiling anything. So I was like, that sounds very interesting, very excited about this. The part that I want to talk about that first made me not enjoy this book deals with non-con / dub-con, which if you don't know what that means, non-con is non-consensual and dub-con is like dubious consent, which is like, dubious is like very murky. There's no clear yes where there's no clear no. And in cases like that, it's better to just not do anything. So that comes about when the boy, he grows up a little bit. He's an adult now, and he's still obsessed with this idea. So he puts an ad in the paper talking about just finding kids that have something wrong with them in like the language department. So he ends up getting a phone call or a letter or something from this lady with this son who doesn't speak. So the guy ends up going to the house and he meets the son. Obviously the son doesn't speak, he's just talking to the lady, and they set up an appointment for him to actually come back and to interview or to observe her son. And they set it for, let's just say Saturday. So they set this appointment for Saturday for him to come back and observe her son. He comes back like the next day or something and breaks into her home, and she's asleep on the couch, which, keep up with me here. As a reader, she's asleep on the couch, and he like goes over to her and she's like wearing a robe or something, and he like pulls the robe open and she's naked, and his dialogue is like, she's clearly awake. This is what he's saying. He's like, she's clearly awake. She knows I'm doing this to her. And so then he just like begins to touch her and stuff. And he's like, oh, she's like definitely awake. Like she wants this. And so then he leaves and it becomes like a thing for them. So he would like go to the house, observe, and then come back at another time or something and have sex with her while she is asleep or drunk or whatever. And like after the first initial one, it is clear that she is awake because she is making noises and she puts herself in positions where she has to be awake to do that. But the very first instance, it was very much so like to the reader, she was asleep, and in his mind, he was like, oh, she's awake. So I think the author was trying to make it seem like it was okay because she knows what's happening, but it was just done so in a way that it wasn't made clear enough, and it made me very uncomfortable. And again, a bad character does not equal a bad book, but because it was done in that way, that it wasn't clear to the reader as it was to the person, it missed the mark. And then everything bad after that, I was just like, it left a sour taste in my mouth. So, I mean, still the concept of it is interesting, and I saw a lot of people liked the book on the reviews. A lot of other people didn't because it was very flowery, and it would like progress along the plot, and then it would go back to his childhood and talk about his mom for like pages. I don't mind that. I actually really liked the writing, but it was so bad in just the actions that took place, and I didn't think that the character development of him was that great because it basically was just like, oh, I'm getting older and becoming more obsessed with this one idea, and like that was it. Like there wasn't really anything. Also, I put the trigger warnings in another video for this book. There's also abuse / taking advantage of somebody that is mentally not there. And although that person, she acts like she's happy and she's fine, she's still not completely there. So yes, he is just a bad person, like a bad character. And if that makes you uncomfortable, I wouldn't suggest this book because the plot itself doesn't say anything about that stuff. So if that doesn't interest you, wouldn't pick it up. Yeah, gave it 2 stars. That's how I feel. Okay. The second to last book that I have is Sweet by Emmy Laybourne. Oh my god, I hate this. My hair. This is fine. So the plot of this book is there is a new weight loss sweetener, and in order to promote it, these people give away this free cruise, basically. And there's a lot of celebrities on there, a lot of reporters, and then there's just like the normal people that get the chance to go on it. And it's all inclusive and everything's fun, and they basically just get to enjoy a free cruise and try out this weight loss sweetener. Without giving away spoilers, this sweetener works so well that people will do anything to get it. Like anything. So that's what intrigued me, because I was like, they're stuck on a cruise ship, and it's kind of in a sense like living on an island or being in isolation, because that's all that they have. It's just this little cluster of people on this cruise ship. I didn't like it because of the characters. Now, the writing was fine. The plot was fine. I didn't like the ending, but I'm not gonna delve into that because spoilers and stuff. But the character, especially the main character, like who we're kind of seeing the eyes from, if you don't like that person or don't relate or can't get through it, you're not gonna enjoy the book. She was very much like, not like other girls type girl, but it wasn't done so organically. It was very much so pointing out every time that she was wearing like boots or cowboy boots, and that she was a little bit chubbier, and she liked to play guitar and like all this stuff. And it's like the majority of the world is a little bit chubbier. You know, it's not that big of a deal to have a chubby, fat, plus size character, so why do you have to make that a plot point in a book? Also, the whole like cowboy boots thing, when like everyone else was famous and like high heels or just like average and like not really standing out, like why? Who cares? They're shoes. It doesn't make you a person to wear different kind of shoes. It was brought up so much that I just was so annoyed by her. And I felt like she was very one-dimensional, as were other characters. Like, they had their very, like, specific lines. You know what I mean? Like, they just said things to say them to, like, keep the plot going. And I was not invested in her or any of the relationships that happened. And the only thing that kept me reading was actually the plot. I really liked the plot. But I gave it 2 stars because it was just so annoying to read from her perspective. And I just didn't like the way that she was given her personality, because it wasn't really one. It was kind of like, I'm not like you, so I'm better, without actually being better, because she was like, oh, I'm so different. Nobody likes me. Yeah, because you whine all the time about wearing cowboy boots, you bitch. It just doesn't work. It was a no from me, and I'm sticking to it. Last book that I have is 13 Minutes by Sarah Pinborough. This book, the official title is I Was Dead for 13 Minutes and Now I Want to Know Why, and it's basically this girl who ends up in a river and dies literally for 13 minutes, and she's brought back to life, and she can't remember what she was doing at the river, what happened. She can't remember a couple days before that, and all she knows is that when she wakes up from the hospital, her 2 best friends are acting very strange, and any questions that she asks, like throughout the book, like, hey, like, were we okay? Were we fighting? Like, at the time, they were all like, no, what do you mean? Like, crazy. So, very weird. So she enlists the help of her former best friend, one that she used to have a couple years ago, to try and help her figure out what happened and why her 2 best friends are acting very weird. I didn't like this book because I feel like it was so boring. They could have chopped, like, 75 to 100 pages off this book, and it could have been so much better. There was so much filler that didn't mean anything. Like the old best friend's boyfriend, he was in it so much, and he furthered the plot in one instance. Just in one. I don't know if the author wanted you to grow like attached to him, see his like development or anything. Didn't matter. Also, the boyfriend's was it older brother or something? Whoever he was living with, I don't even know who he was, starts dating the detective that was on this case. Didn't really mean anything. It's just like random things. And then they threw in like diary entries from the girl that died just to like see if her memory was coming back and see what was happening. They threw in interviews that they had with the people around her to see what led up to this, who she was hanging out with, if there were any arguments, and like any suspects that they had among them, they would ask them, you know, interrogation questions. It was boring. It wasn't like, there was no slip ups, there was no pointing a finger at anybody, and I don't know. I would never read this again. Her writing was great. Like, it wasn't childish, it wasn't cheesy. It was just so long because of so many things thrown in there that didn't need to be thrown in there. If they took half of the boyfriend's dialogue out, half of his brother or whatever's dialogue out, just random stuff. Like, I don't know. I feel like I'm like missing something from the book. Like, it wasn't hard hitting enough for me. But yeah, the plot is basically her trying to figure out what happened and why her best friends are acting weird. And then there's a twist ending, of course there is. And it just drags on and on and on until like the end. And you're like, okay, let me be done, please. So that book got 2 stars just for pure boredom. Oh my God, I cannot stress it enough. Jesus. Okay, I got very heated. I'm so sorry. But with that, I want to say thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.